Start now? Yeah? Hey, how's it going? For the protection of one of my co-speakers, I have this disclaimer in here. Basically, we're not going to talk about any government-related stuff.
Know what to the scope. So the test is made and published.
That's kind of my main focus.
It's the Frog AV has been tested.
And run a company called Tech Research. Normally this talk has two other co-speakers. There are three of us that did this work, but only one is here today, so I'll do my best.
So that's why the quality of the samples used is very important.
He's pretty smart.
Maybe you have seen results where a product scores the best, and other it's when the same product scores bad. So there's constantly the question, why does it happen?
He does penetration testing and things like this, and he was sort of our guide
would be, okay, maybe the sample set used does represent just the portion of the whole landscape, or the methodology is different than the methodology used.
Agencies. Alright, cool. So originally, I was, watching
two points: the rogue AV and the mobile security. At the mobile security, we have released just 1 week before our mobile security report.
Let's do a talk that
bounces Android is not
perfect.
It's a short answer.
And I started thinking, we don't just because we see something in the news doesn't mean we really know what exactly is going on.
I think it will be in future one of the platforms with the most.
Actually go and get on the ground and see what's happening before we start, talking about your crap. So this talk mostly focuses on looking at the Chinese hacking community, some of the tool sets that they use and the things that they do, how they're the same as us or different than us, and try to get some understanding between us. So rather than assume things like, okay, well this IP address is Chinese, therefore the attack is Chinese. We went and gathered a bunch of information, reverse engineered some binaries, talked to people, did research on Chinese forums with the help of Anthony, who provided a lot of translation for us. And then we actually went to China to back up and verify what the research we had done. A lot of it was wrong, so it was a good thing that we actually went to China. So first thing I'm going to do is go through a little bit of terminology. These are some phrases. We'll have them written in Chinese and English so that if you want to go out and do some research or look at Chinese forums, you can get a feel for what words to look for, what phrases are popular. We'll talk a little bit about Chinese hackers specifically, their white hats and their black hats, and then go somewhat deeply into some Chinese malware. Alright, so all these translations are done by Anthony Lai. What's interesting here, so this is a phrase that's used a lot by Chinese hackers, and it translates to chicken. This is sort of their way of saying Trojan horse. And the way he explained to me is, well, a chicken you have like there on the table ready to butcher and eat. And so that's why they use that phrase for machines that they've broken into. I don't know how to pronounce the Chinese words, but whatever. This one right here refers to like injected iframes, which is a real popular way that Chinese hackers use to break into stuff. And this one here, he wrote prevented to be killed, but I think he really means persistence. This is like a technique for being persistent on a system. So if you're going to go and do your own research into Chinese hacking forums, you can look for these words. So in China, the concept of a genealogy or a heredity of hacking groups, communities, and people is really important to them. So they categorize it by generations. So they have multiple generations of hackers. Now, when I went to China, I was told that some of these lists are 100% accurate. So, take them sort of with a grain of salt, but they give you a general idea. Focus more on the generational differences than the actual names of the guys themselves. So the first generation of hackers in China is actually similar to some of the earlier generations here. These were guys who, did a lot of research, were kind of academic, and ended up founding companies that are important in China now. And I got a few examples of companies like Kingsoft and some of these other ones. So these guys were considered to be the first generation of hackers in China. Between like 97 and 2002, there were generation's coming out, and the second generation sort of focused on this concept of cyber war. They did a lot of like web defacements and politically motivated defacements, especially around anniversaries. And there's a guy here, I can't really pronounce his name, Yoongi, who's sort of a famous hacker from this particular generation. A lot of the younger hackers look up to him or reference him in their works. So the third generation has a larger list of guys. Some of them asked us to put the caveat that they're all white hats. You know, take that how you will. But there's a few interesting guys here. So, you know, they sort of do like we do. They celebritize their really, you know, productive hackers, the people that put out interesting tools. One thing I've noticed about Chinese hackers is they have really poetic names. You know, like Western hackers have names like, you know, Dark Evil and stuff like that. And the Chinese guys are, you know, Good Water, Good Well, just really poetic names. So these are a few different guys from the fourth generation. There's a tool called Wigizi or Gray Pigeon, which is sort of a really famous hacking tool. It's almost like the Chinese BO2K equivalent. And I'll talk quite a bit about that tool a little bit later. One of the more important hacker groups that are still around right now really is this Evil Octal. So I encourage you to check them out. So the fifth generation of hackers in China has sort of the same problem that other countries have with their more recent generations, which is rather than being all about finding vulnerabilities or writing tools or building communities, they're more financially motivated. They pretty much download tools and just use them, more like script kiddies. And a lot of the previous generations don't have a lot of respect for the new ones. Anthony also wanted to just highlight some security vendors that are important or notable in China. And I have a list of them right here, NS Focus, Lenovo, a few others. I'm not really going to read the list, but when you download the slides later, you can check these out. China also has sort of a vibrant white hat community, sort of like the West has. 360 is a really famous antivirus company in China. And then there's all these other companies that focus on providing defensive tools or white hat security research. All right, so I think this is like our only slide on APT, and it's basically just referencing other people's work. We tried to stay very apolitical because, one, our co-speaker lives in China, and two, we were going to China right after giving the talk the first time, so we didn't want to get anyone in trouble. All right, so in the West, black hats tend to communicate in private IRC channels, private SOAP channels, by telephone, phone conference bridges. In China, they tend to communicate in forums, so a lot of times you can actually go and find these web forums and sort of read their communications back and forth. And everybody uses a tool called QQ, which is like instant messenger. So you get a number. It's very similar to ICQ. You get assigned a number, like a phone number, and then you can chat back and forth. Yeah, I'm going to show some slides on that in a little bit. Yeah, there's some cool stuff in QQ. A lot of these hacker forums are pay for membership, so you sort of have to pay to get in, which is interesting. And it's pretty easy to get victim servers. China overall doesn't have a very strong culture of InfoSec defense, so they have a big problem with tons and tons of vulnerable machines in China that get used by hackers for all kinds of things, both internal hackers and external hackers. I know various groups of black hats from the US that break into China, take those machines, use them to hack back into the US, and everyone goes, look, China's hacking us. The US guy's doing it. They have a very well-developed Trojan industry. I think we have some financial stats on another slide here coming up, but basically there's a lot of sales of Trojans going on in China. They sort of advertise attack services, which is quite a bit different than here. I mean, you can find some underground forums where you can do a hire a hacker type thing, but they're fairly rare here, and they're a little bit more prevalent over there. It's very cheap to get access to bots in China. I think it's like 0.1 cents per bot, or it's like 1 cent per bot. So according to some statistics that Anthony gathered, in 2009 there were like 2.5 million more Trojans compared to the previous year that came out. So just like this, so something you see over here, a massive acceleration of malware hitting lots of businesses. And they have some statistics about how much money is lost, 100 billion RMB. So, speaking of advertising and tax services, this is an actual advertisement. We have a translation over here, which you can't read, but I'll just sort of give you a feel for it. So you go to this forum and you're like, okay, I need a hacker, let me see what's available. And they give you like a laundry list of all the stuff they'll do for you. They'll do denial service, they'll provide Trojan horses, break into systems for you. QQ-based Trojans. They talk about what programming languages they're proficient in, that they can write their malware, like Delphi is a pretty common one. They talk about attacking AS active server pages and things like this. So, you know, that's like a menu. This is a little bit closer up translation of another advertisement for hacking services. And the translations are a little iffy, right? You know, because using machine language translations is difficult, but you'll notice this one here talks specifically about remote control with Gray Pigeon. Gray Pigeon is that Easy tool I talked about a minute ago, and we reverse engineered it a little bit, and I'll give some examples. But basically, it's pretty common to find advertisements, you know, hacking for hire. So some of the things that Chinese hackers like to go after, as far as like what their particular targets are. In particular, they like to steal QQ accounts because, you know, people communicate and you can monitor their communications. Game accounts is real big. I think I was reading it's like a $6 billion industry to steal game accounts, because they essentially will like break into a bunch of people's World of Warcraft accounts, steal their gold and their items, and then resell them on another market so they can monetize it that way. We see tons and tons of malware that's specifically designed to go after game accounts. So usually what you see is a forum advertising hacker tools or hacker for hire. They may provide a tool that you just download. You tell it what Trojan you want to embed, and it will generate like a malicious website for you with exploits. And we've got a bunch of examples coming up. Yeah.
Is that tied into the gold farming industry, or is that just a separate?
Yeah. No, totally.
Okay.
You mean like gold farming in games?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the point is like, so you have two things going on there. Labor's really cheap, so you have these sweatshops full of guys who are basically just playing these games and mining, you know, farming gold, and then they will set up websites where you can go buy gold, so you don't have to go and kill monsters for 3 weeks straight to get your resources. Then other guys are like, well, that's cool, but that's a lot of work. We could just hack those guys, steal all the stuff they farm, and then resell that. And so they make a bigger profit with less labor. This is a joke Anthony made in his broken English, that malware is like dim sum. There's a lot of different variants. So we used a methodology when looking at this. We didn't try to go in and do like a, you know, take it back to source code and understand every possible thing the malware could do. We focused more on comparing data between samples to look for commonalities of technique, focus, goals, code reuse, this sort of thing. Try to get a feel for the community and sort of what their focus is and what they do. We have some automation systems to do our malware analysis so that we can plug in tons of samples and just get out this sort of information. So this is an example of a piece of malware that we were looking at. I think the site may still be up, so you can go download this sample if you wanted to. But there's a bunch of variables within this malicious site that are, you know, in Chinese and have a particular pronunciation that helps you tell sort of what region it's from. And this is an example of that. What's cool about this is when you're looking through the code of this malicious site, you see these interesting words like one day and I need you. They're like romantic strings, right? And we were like, what the hell is this all about? So Anthony did a little digging and found that they're like lyrics from, you know, the Taiwanese Britney Spears guy, right? So that's really interesting because this tells you a lot of things. Like one, it's pretty unlikely that some American black hat put up this site, right? Because what the hell is he going to know about some famous singer over there. So this gives you a pretty good indication, yeah, this is likely to be Chinese or Taiwanese. And it also tells you what type of music the attacker is into, or at least, thinks is funny. Earlier I was mentioning that Yoongi guy, like the second generation famous hacker that a lot of people like. This is another malicious site that we found. And you can't read this, but down here, buried in the code, we actually see a variable that's his name. So we can see, current generations of Chinese hackers paying homage to previous generations. They also leave little clues like this, where you can see, okay, well the guy that wrote this is on a Windows box, and here's the path to his tool sets or whatever. So one interesting thing that happened a while back was there was a version of QQ being circulated, and this might be what you alluded to. QQ is like their instant messenger, as I mentioned before. And this is a screenshot of it, so it actually looks pretty legitimate. This is what QQ looks like, or at least one of the clients for it. We got the MD5 hash here. But when you monitor what this QQ does, what you'll notice is that while it's connecting you to the QQ network, it's also sending your username and password to the Chinese government. So every time you log into your chat to talk to people, it's like going off. Now, I say Chinese government, it's sending it to a Chinese government website. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the government. It could be somebody hacked that website and is using it to monitor the QQ accounts they harvest. We don't know for sure. We're not making any comment on whether the Chinese government did this or not. But you can see it's like whatever.gov.cn, and right here is the path on the web server they're doing the get, and here's the username and the password, just clear text, straight up sent. So, Anthony did a little digging, just basic quiz lookup to verify that it's a Chinese government site. You can go to the site. It's a very pretty site. It's a regional site there in China. Maybe they're a victim of their own APT, like somebody's breaking into their stuff and using it. I don't know. So Anthony did a little digging on this particular Chinese government site and found that the site itself is loaded with like iframes and malicious JavaScripts and redirections to other exploits. So if you go to that Chinese site, your box is likely to get owned, which is kind of concerning, right? Because lots of people in China probably go to that site for various services or whatever, and they're all getting owned. So this is just a diagram of the path, but I think it's pretty obvious. You log into QQ, the bad guy gets a copy of your credentials. I'm skipping a few of Anthony's slides. So there was a recent attack that was analyzed by a group called Armorize in China, and I'm not going to go too much into the details, but one thing that's interesting is they charted out sort of every component of this particular attack. But inside here, there's this anhey.shockwave flash file. And we did a little digging and found that there were other components here in the site. Here's some code going to that anhey.shockwave flash. We're like, what the hell is anhey? And anhey means darkness. I'm mangling the pronunciation, but that's okay. So we started looking around, and there's actually this website called anhey.com, and it's a Chinese website. And you take a look at it, and it's like it's got a huge menu of exploit tools. So this is basically a hacking group, and we found a live example of one of their sites online. But they have a huge amount of stuff. I mean, inside each one of these links is a ton of tools, and we pretty much downloaded all of them. And when we start looking at what each one of these tools are, this is just an example screenshot. This is like pick your exploit. So they have like MS Office exploits, Aurora exploit, ActiveX exploits, Firefox. So they have all these different types of exploits. You essentially put in the URL to your Trojan, like whatever your particular backdoor that you want to use. You pick which exploits you want to deploy, and you hit go, and it creates the website for you. You throw that up somewhere on the internet and start collecting victims. Some of these will actually, you can pick an option to display the source code of the malicious site that it generates, so you can get information there. A lot of these different tools provide even obfuscators, so you can say, okay, well, I want this particular website to be obfuscated with character encoding or whatever encoding you want. It's pretty impressive that they've almost industrialize the deployment of exploits, right? So if you were to run one of these tools, the other thing that's interesting is these are sort of screenshots of different tools, and they all have a real similar feel to them. They all look the same, so you can get used to how to use their tools because they have the same sort of GUI interface. So like here's an example of a tool. You go in, you put the URL to what you want your payload to be, you pick your exploit, you hit go, and it's going to generate a directory here with a variety of files. So there's like a skin something.dll, which I'll talk about here in a minute, the generator itself, and then a different HTML file or whatever file format for different exploits. So there's like a Firefox exploit, Internet Explorer exploit. So taking a look at one of those files, there's like an IE heap spray attack here. So Colin did an analysis of the shell code that gets generated by these tools, and what's interesting is we have a collection of tools over time, over the course of several months, and you can see a sort of an evolution of the way they do their shell code. This is one of the earlier tools, and you can see here like it's pretty much clear text. You switch this to hex, and you can see the URL to whatever payload you put in right there. Most of the shell codes have this padding at the back, and it always looks basically the same. So they're pretty identifiable and easy to signature. Then a little bit later, the tool got a little more sophisticated. The shell code got smaller. It's still clear text. You can still see your payload in there. And then they came out with like a little bit more of a high-end shell code generator. This does some obfuscation. The shell code gets really small and encoded and very difficult to analyze. So they started off with like, oh, we don't care. Here's just some basic shell code BS. And over time, they've just gotten more sophisticated. I think this is over the course of 3 months. So it was a pretty quick, progression. I'm gonna skip over some of these. Yeah, so one thing that's interesting is comparing the output of the generators themselves, as they build these things. One thing you'll notice is that they use this padding here with the word QQQ. So I don't know if they went through a name change or what exactly happened, but Anhey, all the tools on Anhey have some reference to QQQ in them. So I think that's also the name of their group, or the name changed at some point. But if you look at the various tools, all of them output an exploit payload that has either QQQ or just Q. Another cute example. So you can see like there's a very signaturable. If you see a payload that looks like this, it's probably this group of guys, right? Because they all look pretty much the same. They actually put in like props to HD. They're like, hey, thanks for the idea here or whatever. So what this tells us is they're following our research. So like how closely are we following theirs, right? Probably not as closely as they are. Anthony tells me that Kava is like their name for Kaspersky. And as it turns out, they either really like or really dislike Kaspersky because all of their tools have Kaspersky specific options for evading Kaspersky. And these exploit generators are free. Like you can go to that site right now and download all of them. And there's like 50. They also have a sales hotline. So like they publish their QQ address, and you can go and get tech support for your exploit. And it's like all very public and upfront. So we downloaded. This is like a subset of the ones on their site. And they're named things like IEO Day or whatever. What's nice is that with the RAR files, a lot of them include like a little advertisement that has the QQ number where you can contact them at, as well as the web page. Another cool thing is, so looking at the dates of the particular exploit generators, a lot of these were like 0 day. So the date that this file existed is before the date it was disclosed here in the US that the exploit even existed. So what that tells you is A, they know about O-Day well in advance before any of the vendors do. B, they know about it so well that they've actually created tools that like anybody can just click on and generate an exploit for them. So they have this whole process very industrialized, and it's easy for script kiddies to follow this because you just go to the site, download it, and go. and you've got a no day for like 3 months before it comes out. So if you just monitor their site and download their generators like once a week, you might get some interesting tools. So we did a comparison of like 20 exploit generators from this particular site, and we noticed that they all have this DLL, and there's two versions of the DLL. One's a little bit, has a little bit more functionality, but we didn't know what the hell this was, so we sort of started taking it apart. The other thing this tells us is that they reuse code. So it's not like a bunch of random guys sort of just throwing various exploits out. They have like a code base, they have a development process in place, and it's pretty good. So we took a look at this DLL, and another cool thing that they do is in the resources of DLLs and executables, they include like tons of information, including company name, file version, just like it's legitimate regular software. This DLL turns out to be legitimate, but they even do it with their exploits. Like, I don't know if you can see here, but it's got the IE ODay. They have copyright 2010 and hey, which is funny because there's no copyright in China that I know of. I don't know if you know of different, but I don't think there is. So when you get malware from these types of groups, what's really nice is you can immediately identify, okay, this came from this group, it's this version, it was made on this date, because they provide all that for you right in the resources. These are some more examples. So we did a comparison, and the two DLLs that we found on their site are pretty much the same. There's a little bit of functionality added to the newer one. But what it turns out to be is it's a skin builder. So it's a legitimate site called like UI Power or skinplus.com, something like this. And when you go and check out their site, it turns out like tons of major companies use this, including Huawei and other big name companies in China. So the attackers have gone out and taken a professional GUI library and implemented it into their exploit generation pack so that you can have a clear, consistent GUI for your tools, which I think is really kind of crazy because I don't really see that type of behavior here in the West where they go and they take legitimate software and merge it into their attack tools. So this is a screenshot of Wigeezy, and if anybody wants samples of these, I have them on my laptop. If you got a USB key, I'll hook them up. This is the interface for the backdoor Wigeezy or Gray Pigeon that we were talking about earlier. You can see it's got a lot of functionality here. It can do remote control, it can do capture screen, like screenshots, keystrokes, gather hashes, counts, passwords, all the normal stuff that backdoors usually do. But it also can do turn on your microphone, copy WAV files of whatever you're saying, and then send them out over the network. This is concerning, right, for environments that are not connected to the internet. They can get information that, well, I mean, I guess that makes no sense. But for environments where, auditory control is of concern, this is important. Supposedly, development on Wigeezy has been suspended since 2007, but what Anthony was telling me is that a bunch of people have just taken that code base and just keep maintaining it, so there's like 10 different variants of this particular backdoor. There's even a Wikipedia page about it. So it's pretty famous and widely used. One interesting thing is a lot of these tools, including Gray Pigeon, have an option for obfuscating the file or packing the file, but it's just UPEX in most cases. So they're not using like advanced obfuscation on these. The generators themselves are packed with some custom packer that's very difficult to unpack. But the output of the, if you're making a Trojan, like a Trojan client with one of these, the output is packed with UPEX. So they protect their own tools really well. They protect the payloads that you get from them really crappy. So this is an example of the interface in Clay Pigeon. You can see, like, as you hack tons of machines, you basically get a list here, and then you can expand these and gather information about each one. You just sort of right-click and say, all right, give me a screenshot on that one. Okay, give me the keylog on that one. Give me the audio files from that one, whatever. Yeah, it's the Chinese version of CoreImpact, right? And by cheap, you mean free. I mean, it's not quite as pretty as Core, but it's pretty cool. You do get support through their helpful QQ. You can just chat right with the guy. All right, so there's a few components to Gray Pigeon. There's this h_client.exe is the main program. When you run that, it generates an INI file. and a couple other files which I'll tell you about because they're kind of funny. So one of the files it generates is like a EULA. So, they're not liable for any bad things that happen if you use their software, obviously. So here they're giving a little disclaimer saying, yeah, Weezy might be mistaken for a virus by your antivirus program, but don't worry about it, it's safe, we promise. They got a disclaimer here. You unconditionally agree to all statements listed in the following amounts. So they do their attack hacker black hat software like a professional business. They have all the components of a regular software company. They've got change logs, so you can see date by date all the things they've added, whatever. Along with Weezy was this file, which I still haven't quite figured out exactly what it does. But if you look through it, it's pretty interesting because it has a huge list. I mean, this list goes on and on and on. These are strings. It's got Armed Forces Radio, names of universities, Marlboro College. It's got names of companies, Hewlett-Packard, Xerox. Over here, it's got these little numbers, and I wasn't sure if they were. I started looking up. They're part numbers for specific electronic components. So you have this massive DAT file that's full of company names, IP addresses, electronics components. I don't know exactly what that is, but it kind of feels like a target list. Yeah, that could be. That could be. The idea I had was the software built into it has a list of things to watch for, and if somebody hacks that, it sends something else back to somebody else and says, hey, they got into this stuff. So, the backdoor has a backdoor. All right, so we're going to talk about some more findings. We have a whole bunch of malware that we've collected. So the first one was found in an actual intrusion, and it's called SBO host. And one of the things you'll notice is characteristic of Chinese attacks is they'll take names of Windows executables and mangle them slightly. It's like SVC host, or mmc.exe will be mmr.exe or whatever. They'll just change it slightly, or even use the exact same name and put it in a strange place. So we have some stats about this. We weren't able to detect what packet it was, but it was definitely packed with something custom. So I'm not going to read through this, it's just basic information. But looking here, once we were able to unpack this and get the strings, we found a couple of interesting strings, including an email address for bynm@phantom.org, written in LeetSpeak, and then another string for Phantom in here. So we did a little searching around, and it turns out there's a Chinese hacker group called the Phantom Security Team, and they've got a blog. So this malware that we found on a real client system, where they were owned and a lot of bad things were happening, we were able to go back right to the guys that wrote the tool. It doesn't mean these are the guys that use the tool, but at least we know who wrote it. So the other cool thing is they don't do a lot to obfuscate these tools. This is a screenshot of me looking at this tool in a debugger, and you can see the actual title of the tool itself contains the URL of the hacker group. So if you just throw these things in a debugger and look, a lot of times you can find out where to go get information on who wrote it. This is a tool called NBSI, and it's for hacking web servers, SQL injection type stuff. And you can see, just like the other attack tools I showed earlier, it has a menu of options. So you can pick your different SQL servers or what you want to do. I just set up a netcat listener and ran it against myself and got the output of it. So it does validate HTTP connections. Here we have another example. One thing a lot of the Chinese tools do very frequently is they create batch files, and the batch files, do temporary things like move things around, delete files, whatever. So we see a ton of that. Let's see. Which one was this one? All right. So this is the contents of what this particular batch file did. So it does things like add stuff to the registry, create a link file. It just moves stuff around. Another example here, creating a startup.batch file. So what's interesting is like this particular tool drops another tool called mchicken.dll. If you remember previously, the term chicken means like backdoor Trojan, and that's exactly what this is. So they name it pretty helpfully for us. This is a screenshot of another tool called HDSI, and it's the same thing. It's like a SQL injector. You can see here the output of it. It's doing like a create table, and it's got some dude's name in there, I think. But they're very featureful. Like you have a lot of options. You can obfuscate if you want to encode your SQL injections. Try to do some IDS evasion. That's all built in there. So the model here for this is build a tool, throw it up on a whole bunch of forums that people have to subscribe to, people have to pay, then that's how you sort of monetize the initial use of it. Put a lot of work into anti-detection. I didn't talk too much about it, but I think I showed one of the payloads with the Kaspersky specific stuff. Almost all of these tools have a evade Kaspersky button. So when you're generating your payload, you can include that. Provide continuous support. And a lot of times these guys get hacked. And so I think that's one of the things that's going on with that DAT file. So yeah, looks like I'm coming to the end here. So some of the conclusions we had, we went to China and we talked to guys. Well, we saw the talks going on at XCon, which are at sort of the same level or above the level of the talks at Black Hat in many of the US conferences. We have guys talking about virtual machine-based binary protectors that use strong crypto. We have guys talking about, ASLR debt bypass in Windows 7. There was people talking about polymorphism for binaries to evade antivirus. I mean, they sort of have every component that you need for a really strong capability to, break into lots of systems. And they follow us. I mean, they watch all of our forums, they watch Twitter, they watch what HD says or other speakers say. They take those ideas and they implement them in their own ways. One of the things I think they do differently than us is they have a huge community of thousands of people that just throw these tools up that anybody can download for free rather than productizing them the way that we do. We make penetration testing tools. They just offer this stuff up to anybody that wants to use it. And it's at the same level or even above of professionalism. A lot of these tools have identifying marks, so it's pretty easy to track back to who developed them. Now, I'm not making any comments on government tools. That could be a totally different ballgame. But these are sort of the non-government black hat criminal element tools that we were able to find. And this allows a lot more people to hack with very little knowledge. So I think that's one of the reasons why you see so much information coming out from China, like lots of hacking happening. It's because it's so easy for random people to just pick up one of these tools and go. The fee for entry is pretty low. So give me a second here. So basically all of these tools are distributed in like RAR files. We have a whole bunch of different versions like NBSI 3.rar, HDSI 3.rar. Let me pop one of these open for you. So I actually have the source code to a lot of these tools as well. They come with all sorts of informational files. I don't have the Chinese language pack in here, but I mean, literally just by downloading these tools, you can start sort of mapping out who's who in this particular community. I mean, here's a reference to Lion. He's a pretty famous, well-known guy. From what I've heard, he's actually given up technology and is like studying to be a Buddhist monk. But yeah, if anybody's interested in copies of this stuff, I'd be happy to hook it up. Gedit doesn't want to open this. So anybody have any particular questions about anything?
A lot of the tools you said is like industrial, like
the guys at XCon that we saw, they were definitely innovating. Like they would take where we're at and they'd go a step ahead. So they're adding a little bit. There's obviously something going on because a lot of these tools are deploying zero-day, and they're mostly focused on client-side zero-day, like Internet Explorer, web browser exploits. And there's zero days that we're, at least in the vendor community, not aware of. So somebody's doing that. The sort of feeling I get is that there's a handful of guys that write tools and find exploits, and then there's a huge number of people that just use them and have no idea how they really work. What I see in a lot of the attacks and the incidents that I respond to is they're not very sophisticated attacks because they don't really care. I mean, that's one of the sort of differences between Western black hats and Chinese black hats. Western black hats will guard their zero days very closely and only use them if they have to because they don't want to get them burned. Chinese black hats seem to have like so much access to so many different tools in zero days that they don't care. So they don't care if they get caught. They don't care if you know who wrote it. They don't care if you see the command control IP address going back. They don't care if their O-day gets blown. They're just throwing whatever. So there's a dichotomy. There's sophistication in certain areas and like none in others. The use of the attacks are not very sophisticated, but sometimes the exploits themselves are.
Do you think the average person in China is aware of security like in the West, or hopefully in terms of the patching and so on, or is the general...
No. I mean, I could be wrong, but the talks that I had with the guys that I met in China is that that's a huge problem. Like most people have no awareness of security, so there's tons of machines that are just not patched. People will run antivirus, and that's about it.
One of the problems is they can't patch the systems to the counter, so they can't get anything. So it's like you're not going to have an advantage, so a lot of them are stuck in a certain version they're never going to progress. So it's like they don't have a choice to patch. And that's not just, users who are buying off the black market. You'll see cafe shops, you'll see internet shops, you'll see government shops that, and corporation shops that have non-dealing Windows software. And it's nothing patched.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. And I mean, that was one of the big problems that all of the Chinese hackers I talked to were sort of complaining about. Is like, there's no real defense in China. It's not prevalent. There's not a lot of vendors. I think I heard recently that the government was either going to or did kick all U.S. security vendors out of the country. So like, yeah, it's a problem. Yeah.
So do you see innovation on the hacking and obfuscation and countermeasure side? Because it seems like every time I've felt any of this, the exploitation stuff is very complex and innovative, but a lot of times the way they're hacking and obfuscating is really complex and haven't seen it. Or is it just...
I do and I don't. It depends. So people who are using these sort of canned exploit tools, the anti-analysis stuff sucks, right? But a lot of the attacks when I'm doing incident response that I see, so I don't see this stuff show up in US countries. I mean, I'll see it up on websites and whatever, like drive-by download stuff. But the attacks I see in US countries are full of anti-analysis, like debugger detection, binary obfuscation using like strong methods, like VM protect style methods, tool killing. So, if they detect sysinternals tools or Wireshark, whatever, they kill those. So yeah, I see a lot of, and there were at least 2 talks on anti-analysis at XCon that were very, very sophisticated, like the most sophisticated I'd seen.
So based on your research, do you have any sort of sense from people you've spoken with from China that the average age of the users of these tools, if not the creators of the tools and the end user, scripting users? Like, is there much difference between North America and...
I didn't get that sense. I mean, a lot of the guys that I talked to and met are the developers or the researchers, and they're all, late 20s.
Like I was getting at
the users are younger.
The lack of obfuscation and defense technology might be sort of the age gap or maturity thing that maybe they migrate to later in life.
I don't know if it's, no, I don't really, I think it's more that they don't care. I mean, nobody does anything about it, so like, what I see in the incidents that I deal with is they use the bare minimum to get past whatever they have to get past, whether it's detection or, you know, whatever. And if you raise your bar, then they immediately have something to get past that. So they don't, you know, hit you with the most sophisticated, crazy thing. They hit you with the lowest thing they can. And as soon as you bump your security up, they're like, oh yeah, okay, well we have this other version that can take care of that. And you bump it up again, they're like, yeah, we don't care about that. Here's the next thing. Like one place I was at blocked all of China. Like, we're just going to block every IP in China. And within an hour, they were back in from trusted IPs in the US that they had already owned like a long time ago. So they adapt really quickly. I think it's less a matter of maturity or age or anything like that, more a matter of it just doesn't matter. Like they use what works, and as long as it keeps working, they keep doing it.
Well, other than the gaming credentials, what other than data are different? Because you see a lot of these Europe now where they typically have regular instructions for and describe data, things like that. So do you see any regular instructions targeting specific data from a user's computer?
Yeah. So I mean, they'll look for specific types of games and game accounts. They definitely have things built into the tools to look for that. It sort of depends on which type of attack I'm looking at.
So it's all in the toolkit, so they just check.
Yeah, it's like the Brazilian banker Trojans from a few years ago had like specific banks that they would target and specific like form field names and stuff like this. It's the same thing, but it's for the games.
So the tool, when they create the tool, that's when they specify what it's not in common in all the tools. Like all the STO, those WAC, it's not common.
Yeah, it's in the payload. It's not in the exploit generator. If that makes sense. So, like Anhei pretty much exclusively distributes exploit generators. And all the exploit generator does is go download something and run it. So, they'll give you a website with Ode on it, and the payload's up to you what it does. So all that Ode is going to do is hit your site, download your executable, and run it with privilege on the victim system. You then have to either go out and get like Wigizi, Gray Pigeon, or some other, you know, like game harvesting payload and deploy that through the generator. So it's kind of separated, right? You have one team writing the exploits and one team writing the payloads. And I saw that at XCon as well, in the way they spoke. Like, there was one girl whose entire focus was on shellcode optimization, reliability, speed. She didn't know how to find bugs. She didn't know how to really reverse it. She didn't know anything but that specific field. And then the next guy was an expert in his specific, ASLR and depth bypass, but he didn't do the other stuff. So they're sort of like very focused on specific fields. Anybody else? Yeah.
Do you have any evidence that sophisticated users are targeted by those tools? Like, is everything Windows-based and ready to deploy by websites, or do you have any evidence of more sophisticated intrusion into higher security facilities?
Yeah. Okay. So. Almost everything, everything that I've seen in the wild is Windows targeted. A lot of the people that I talk to in China are, in the next coming year, going to focus on OS X. So that's the next thing. And for this talk, and with my co-speakers, that research only focused on criminal black hat type stuff, so less sophisticated. I myself on incidents have seen tools that target specific individuals. One example I have is the initial vector was like an attachment to a spear phishing email, sort of typical thing. And the tool that came in was detectable by like some antivirus. It wasn't that sophisticated. And what we see them do is gather window title names, take a screenshot, do a little bit of indexing of the hard drive, and if it's interesting, another tool comes in, that one gets removed, and the other tool's like memory only, super anti-analysis capable. So it's almost like there's two teams. There's like the initial team that just breaks into lots of stuff and doesn't care. But if they hit something really interesting, like maybe stuff in that DAT file that I was talking about, then the next team comes in and they have like the real high-level stuff. So I definitely do see that. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah. What do you think the ramifications for the
If you attack in China against Chinese, and what you're doing raises above a certain threshold, yeah, the repercussions can be severe. There was some guys that worked at a bank, I think it was China Bank, and they had actually put some malware on the bank website, like they were doing electronic fraud, and like one of them got executed. So the repercussions can be severe. If you're hacking outside of China, I don't think it matters. And one of the things that I've noticed or heard is that a lot of it is very provincial. So the provinces have sort of their own governments in a way. It's like our state governments, but it's a little more defined. And so different provinces have different levels of enforcement or care about that particular issue. So I think it sort of depends what region you live in. But I think the repercussions are less than what's perceived here in the States. In the States, it's like if you go and steal a bunch of credit cards, you're probably going to get busted and go to jail. Over there, as long as you're not like causing too much trouble internally, I don't think much happens. Anybody else? Yeah, back there.
Jack Chan is the person for the first in China. It's like he's very big over there. That's
interesting.
You see some YouTube videos of commercials.
I had no idea. So do you guys find that Kaspersky is like the popular AV outside the US? Because everywhere I go, that's like... If he endorses it, everyone's buying it. We need to get him to endorse like some American. The free stuff, yeah. Anything free does well. I mean, they also have their own operating systems that they're working on. There's like Kylin and a few other ones but they're not widely used or very prevalent yet. It's still like older Windows. Anybody else? Cool. I guess that's it. Thank you.